All righty. Well, I see 11 o'clock Central. I see some folks are still filing in. That is great. It is awesome to have you guys on the call with me today. I trust that this webinar will be helpful to you. I just want to say welcome, and I hope you're having a wonderful Thursday. And so if you're here, you are here for the JSM Fundamentals webinar with Expium. My name is Sam Ayers, and I'm one of Expium's Atlassian consultants. And today, this is just going to be a walkthrough of JSM. You'll hear me refer to it as JSM, but when I'm saying that, I'm obviously referring to Jira Service Management. And I really want to highlight some of its strengths and capabilities and just kind of show you some of the main features of the tool itself. Just as a side note, I do want to let you know that we have an ITSM webinar coming up next week that talks more in depth about ITSM functionality as it pertains to Jira and Jira Service Management. And you can sign up if you're interested. You can sign up for that class the same way you did for this webinar. And we'll make sure that we have that webinar link posted in the chat. And I'll also at the end of the class kind of have a brief summary of all the upcoming classes that we have coming up in the next couple of months here. So great to be here with you guys. So just as a brief introduction here, this is, again, Jira Service Management Fundamentals webinar here. And so on this slide, I just want to talk about just Jira Service Management from a high level and really highlight what it is and then who it really is for. And when most people come to this webinar, they've got at least somewhat of a familiarity with Jira in general. Which is, Jira software. Jira Core is Atlassian's core issue tracking task management tool. And JSM builds on top of that to a certain degree. It is Jira's well-known issue management, or it has Jira's well-known issue management functionality, but it's rolled up into a service and support management tool. And the idea here is that it allows for an advanced ticketing for either internal or external customers. And it's ultimately providing our customers with this idea of a service. And so before we really start talking about the functionality and features of JSM, I want to spend some time just briefly addressing some of the questions that we often get surrounding who it's really for. Really, when it comes down to it, a lot of teams, regardless of HR team, IT team, facilities team, just as a couple examples, are service teams without actually ever realizing it. And they're providing a service to either internal or external customers. So in the case of a facilities team, for example, they're going to be providing a service to people who live and work in that facility. And when it comes to offering a service, we know there are several different channels of intake. Just to name a few that I'm sure you guys are all familiar with: email, phone calls, even someone passing you in the hallway. This was especially true for me when I was a desktop person, IT person. I would have folks passing me in the hallway. Hey, can you stop by my cube or stop by my desk and fix this when you get a second? And the point is we need some way to track all the work that is being taken care of. And when you have no way of tracking this work, there's no clear prioritization or tracking when you receive requests in this manner, whether it be email, phone calls, physical interactions. Because these are requests that are made in these channels can be really vague. There's no visibility for the requester that would let them know when their request is being handled. As I'm sure we all know, this can lead to the requester pestering you for updates or going to your boss and asking for a request, when it's going to be handled. And obviously we want to avoid that scenario. And so there's a solution here, and the solution at a high level is this idea of a service desk. And a service desk offers a generic intake form for different request types, which can keep requesters up to date on their request and where it's at in the process, or in other words, what status it's in and when it could be potentially resolved, for example. And that is just one example of many pertaining to the who JSM is for. We also have this idea of knowledge bases here, and we'll talk about that briefly in just a moment. Track and maintain SLAs. SLA stands for service level agreement. We'll get into those and how Jira handles that in a more detailed manner. And we already talked about prioritization and managing requests. And then we also get with Jira Service Management this extra layer of a customer portal. And it's something that is designed to be very user-friendly and kind of allow folks to submit requests in a very easy and customer-friendly manner. And then also we have an opportunity in a service desk to automate repetitive tasks. So we'll get into some of this in more detail in a little bit. Real quick, just as short of a teaser for our ITSM webinar that we're hosting next week, JSM has some advanced management features that we won't necessarily touch on too much in this webinar. But I just wanted to encourage you, if you are interested in some advanced features, to pursue our ITSM webinar that I mentioned earlier if you have any interest in learning more about incident management, problem management, change management, just any of those ITIL buzzwords, and or Insight, which has now actually recently been changed to assets for Jira. And this is essentially Atlassian's solution for an asset management tool. We also will touch on OpsGenie, if you've heard about OpsGenie, and Status Page. So again, can't plug this ITSM webinar enough. It really does get you kind of introduced to some of these advanced ITSM features. All right. Let's, before I go any further, and I promise we'll get into the tool. Thank you for your patience. I just want to provide some information about Expium and just give you a sense of who we are and what we do. We are a Platinum Solutions partner with Atlassian. And what that means is we provide a series of services. The first of those, and these are kind of our core competencies, the first of those is training. We provide in-depth training sessions like this webinar for free, but we also offer what we call a Jira Bootcamp, not free, but this is a 3-day deep dive into Jira, which trains you to be a Jira admin. Can't plug this course enough. I've been through it myself. Wonderful class. Our instructors will get you up and going in no time, functioning as a Jira admin. It is a great, great course. We also do Confluence training as well, and we also now offer a Jira Service Management Bootcamp. We've been through several of these now, and we'll also post a link for this in the chat momentarily. Lastly, we offer user academies, which are more geared towards people who are using the tools on a daily basis, but aren't necessarily administering them. We offer consulting across the entire Atlassian suite of products for a wide range of organizations, both large and small. And concerning the solutions we provide, it's important to note that our parent company, which is named Oasis Digital, is a full stack software development company that creates custom software to where we can offer innovative solutions that integrate seamlessly with Jira. So it's an awesome partnership that we have with our developers and Oasis Digital as a whole. And this includes a lot of the work that they're doing. It includes the development of apps, custom integrations using the API, and we've even gone as far as to build complete custom front ends for Atlassian products. So pretty exciting stuff, and we're really proud of that partnership. And we would be remiss if we didn't mention it. So now that you've got a better idea of who we are and what we do, as promised, we're going to jump into Jira. And last thing before we jump in here, if you guys have any questions as we're going through the process here, click the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and feel free to just post those questions in the chat. We will cover those at the end, and I typically like to leave some time, 10, 15 minutes to go over them with you. So just a quick side note there. All right, I'm going to jump out of this presentation. I think we're all done with slides for now. And we're going to start out in the portal, or what we at Expium affectionately call the portal of portals. And this is where customers will first land when they come to your portal or service desk. And you can see here, there's actually, I'm sorry, I'm actually in the wrong screen here. This is the portal of portals here. I apologize. So down here, you can see there's a portal for each Jira Service Management project in Jira within this help desk portal. And so, for example, we have an IT service desk, we have an HR service desk, and a facility service desk. We're just going back to this idea that there are several different teams. It's not just IT teams that are service teams. We can have an HR team or facilities team, for example. And also on this page, you will see a search bar. If you're Google trained or of the Google generation like myself, you will be inclined to interact with this search bar. And I encourage you to do so. It is a very helpful and powerful tool. For example, if I just search for, let's say I'm having a problem with a laptop, I can search hardware or something along those lines. And then I am presented with a couple of things here. I'm presented with a request new hardware request or report a broken hardware request. And so the search bar is incredibly helpful if you're wanting to just get right down to the nitty-gritty of the request that you want to submit. You're also met with, in some cases, a knowledge article. So if I search for VPN, for example, you're presented with not only request options down here at the bottom, but at the top here, you're presented with articles. Knowledge articles is what we refer to these as. And what's great about this is this allows you as the customer to resolve your own problem. This is essentially one avenue for this idea of deflection. We want to encourage our end users to resolve their own issues, and we can do that. Our knowledge articles are a vehicle in order to accomplish this. And so this is a really cool feature here. We're actually presented with articles and requests. So in this case, I could assess these articles as an end user, and if I don't find a solution to my problem, or these don't seem like they're going to resolve my issue, then I can move on to submitting a request. All right. So going back to the portal of portals, the first one we're going to look at is the most common portal, and that is the IT service desk. And so within a portal, if I click on it here, you're met with what we call portal categories, or in this case, these are categories for different request types. So in this case, we have computers, login and accounts, applications, servers, and infrastructure. And when you get into administering Jira, this is highly customizable. You're not married to these categories. These just happen to be the portal categories that we've chosen for our demo site. And then within each group, you can expand these, each portal group, you can expand them to see the request types that live inside of them. So within computers, we have a new request type, request a new laptop, get IT help, request a new software. If I go into login and accounts, I'm met with several different requests that are applicable to this category here. Fix an account problem. You get the idea. So this is just basically kind of a tiered organization. And again, the idea here is just user friendliness. We're presenting our customers with very easy to understand portal categories that'll hopefully steer them to the request that they desire to submit. So for example, let's say I need to order a new laptop. I can go in here, click computers, and request a new laptop. Just to point something out here, going back to this other level of portal categories. So hierarchically, we're looking at help center, portal categories, and then request types under those portal categories. And then what's nice here is actually, you probably noticed here, we have a description under each of these portal categories as well that'll help our users steer in the right direction as far as submitting a request. So requesting a new laptop, let's say I would go into this request, and you can see here that I'm presented with what we call a form. And we like to, or at least from a consulting perspective, steer our clients in the direction of keeping the form as simple and direct as possible. And in this case, this form is no exception. Pretty simple, not super busy in the way of forms or fields. We have a limited amount of options that we want to select here, and we have an opportunity to submit details. And we can say my laptop fell off the top of my car as I was driving away. And we have an option to select the model of laptop that we are using in this case, and this kind of hints at Insight, or now called Assets integration here. This is actually, this field looks pretty benign, but it's actually doing a lot in the background. It's interfacing with Atlassian Assets and pulling in asset information, so pretty cool integration there. And then I click Send to submit it here, and I've just submitted a request for broken hardware. And what's really, really cool, actually, if I go back to our service desk, and let's just pretend that I'm going to submit another request. If I start typing in, let me go to one that actually has a summary. If I start typing in the summary here, you can see that something just happened. A suggested article popped up. So this is kind of Jira's last-ditch effort at deflection. And so as I'm typing in the summary field, it's actually querying against knowledge articles that I've presented to my customer. And so this is just a really cool feature that is just keying off of words that I'm typing, or if I type in computer, for example, or actually VPN, it's going to present a couple of knowledge articles. And again, just this last-ditch effort at deflection. So pretty cool. All right, so now that I've actually submitted my ticket, I'm going to go back to that request. Actually, let me just submit another one here. So I can say my laptop is broken. I've selected my model, and I click submit here. So now that we've actually filled it out, this is the screen that you saw earlier that we're presented with as a customer to a service desk. And down here at the bottom, this is probably the section you're going to be most interested in as somebody who submitted a ticket, and it's the activity section. And this is where updates for a particular ticket reside. We can see statuses, transitions, any comments added by the submitter. It updates someone if I actually go over here, and I can actually share this ticket with somebody else, they're also going to receive updates for a particular incident. So I can share this with my coworker Owen here and click add. And so they're also going to receive updates from this activity section here. So actually, let me go ahead and submit, and we'll come back to the shared with function here in just a moment. But if I add a comment here and say, I need this laptop right away, what's interesting is you actually are met with this wiki style editor here, which allows you just a myriad of formatting options. We have headings, we have bold, italicized text, even some more formatting options here that you should be aware of. And we even have some colors that we can use. We can use the dreaded red text if we really want to heap coals on our service desk agent's head. We all love red text. And then you've also got bulleted lists, numbered lists. You can add links, which is actually probably really helpful. You could also add files or images. So this is where we can add attachments as a submitter of a request. And then we've also got some options here to submit some quoted text or @mention other people, which is kind of neat. If I @mention Owen, for example, he's also going to receive a notification if he's a Jira user with a comment, or this comment that I'm submitting here. So I'll click save. And you can see here that I have a summary of the comment that I just submitted, and which is great. And then ultimately what you'll have too is this back and forth dialogue. So if an agent, and I'll show you that in just a moment here, if an agent replies back, you'll also see your comment down here. I want to talk about the right side of the screen here too. So some other areas that you want to be aware of is the status of the ticket. This is directly correlated to the workflow for this particular issue or request type. So this is something to be aware of as somebody who has submitted a ticket. You have the option to turn notifications on or off for this particular request, which is a nice feature. In this case, you probably want to leave them on. In this case, we've also presented the option to cancel a request. This is customizable here. This is not necessarily something you have to adopt, just as a side note, but this is an option that we've presented to our customers, so that's kind of neat. And then we've got a summary of the request type that we submitted. And then going back to this shared with function here, I briefly talked about it earlier, but this is where you can share this request with other coworkers, or also in this case, you can also share with organizations. So there's this idea, and I can show you on the back end if you're interested, where organizations live. You can create organizations that essentially group customers together. And what's nice is this is a way to notify folks en masse, should you desire to do so. And so this is kind of neat. I'm not going to do this here because I don't want to ping all of my coworkers here within the Expium org, but it is kind of a powerful feature that I want to draw attention to. And then down here, you can see that this status is in a waiting for approval. There's one approval needed, rather. And so in this case, I know that my new laptop request needs to be approved by somebody. In this case, that person's going to be my manager, and I'll show you on the back end of Jira what that looks like. But that's just something to be aware of as a customer. You can see that I'm currently waiting for approval, also denoted by my status at the top. Okay, so up here at the top, one last little section here that I want to cover before we jump into the agent view here is we have this search bar here. Again, very similar, actually exactly the same as the search bar that we saw back in Help Center that's available to us. We can search for different requests, knowledge articles. So that's just another access point for that. And then what's really, really helpful is if I click on this request button, I can see a full history of the requests that I have submitted. And so if I click on Created by Me, for example, I have several different requests that I've submitted over the past year here. And I can filter those requests based on status. I can filter those requests based on who created it or where I'm the participant. And then I can also filter by request type. So I can look at just requests that I've submitted based on, let's say I only want to look at requests where I have submitted a computer break fix request. I can do so by filtering down here, which is kind of neat. So in this case, you can see I've submitted a lot of new laptop requests. And so that's helpful for me to have that history. And then up here too, if I had anything that I needed to approve, I could click on approvals here. What's nice is approvals can be handled by somebody who is leveraging or using a thin customer account. So in this case, customers don't necessarily have to be licensed Jira users. That's an important thing that comes up when we're consulting and helping organizations. That's a question we receive a lot, is that customers don't have to be licensed Jira users. If you have any experience with Jira, you know that licenses, it's on a per license basis for what it's going to cost you. And so that's something that we like to mention here. And what's really nice as a customer, you actually have the ability to approve requests. So just a side note there. So if I was a customer and I wanted to approve a request that required my approval, I could do so out in the portal here, which is kind of neat. All right. So now that we've looked at the request itself from the customer side, let's actually take a look from the agent side of Jira here. So I'm going to go back to Created by Me. And I'm going to go back to my new laptop request here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this link at the top. This is the issue ID here. And just as a side note, this actually won't be accessible to your customers. The reason I can access the issue is because I have a Jira Service Management license here. So just pointing that out, that this is not something your customers necessarily going to be able to do. But it's just a quick way to jump into the issue itself. All right. All right. So from this view, we can see everything that was submitted on the form itself by our customer. We have the reason the equipment's damaged. I have the description that I put in as a customer. I have the laptop model here as well. And then down here, very similarly, I have a more detailed activity section where I can comment on the ticket internally here by clicking Add an Internal Note. We need another laptop please. And this is going to just go to other agents, denoted by the yellow highlight and the lock icon, and also the text here denoting that it is an internal note. I also can reply to the customer and say, we're working on this, period. And then I click save. And an important little note here as an agent, if you want to view the request in the portal, you have this link right here where you can do so. And so if I jump back out to the portal, I can actually see my agent, Sam, my reply here out to the customer. So it's kind of neat to be able to see that in real time. So I'll close this. And you also have a few other things that you probably want to be aware of as an agent within this activity section. You have all these options here. One is to show all activity on a ticket. This is really, really helpful just from kind of an auditing perspective. If you're wanting to look at the full life of a particular issue that's been raised, you can do so using this all activity section here. It just gives you essentially who created the ticket, if automation ran anything against it, for example, any updates that have been done will show up here, which is really, really helpful. Especially if you're another agent that's helping this particular agent work on this issue, this is a great way to see what's been done thus far. As under the comments section, you've seen this already, but this is where you can filter just comments. You can look at the history. This is going to be predominantly transitions and just kind of high level issue history here. You can look at work logs, and this is actually particular to an add-on called Tempo, so we're not going to actually talk about that today. And then time and status is also another add-on here, but sometimes add-ons will actually present options in the activity section depending on what that add-on does, which is what you're witnessing here. So this activity section is where the main communication is going to happen between you and your customer, and that's just something that you definitely want to be aware of. Going to the top right of the issue here, we're going to interact with the ticket itself. And probably one of the more important sections that you want to be aware of is the workflow, or what options are available to you as an agent to work this ticket and what statuses you can transition it to. So up here at the top right, you see this drop down, and this is actually our workflow. What's really, really nice is you have this view workflow button where you can actually see the overarching workflow that is really driving this particular issue. And so we have obviously a status of waiting for approval, waiting for support, and so on and so forth. So it's really, really helpful as an agent to have this as a reference for knowing essentially where this issue can go and how it's going to behave based on the workflow. Down here, we have our SLAs, or our service level agreements that I talked about briefly earlier. And we have our time to first response SLA, pretty standard. And we're noting that it's going to happen within 4 hours. And then we also have our time to resolution SLA, which should mean that we're going to resolve this issue within 8 hours. And so that's just something to be aware of as an agent, that I have agreed upon a service level with my customer, and I'm going to do my darndest to deliver on these SLAs. And then down here, something really important here, we have the option to assign the ticket to somebody. So if I'm a queue manager, I'm going to most likely be assigning it to somebody else. In this case, I'll assign it to Owen here. Or what's really, really nice, if I'm going to be the assignee on this particular incident, I'm going to take ownership of it. I can either A, start typing my own name in here, or B, I have this wonderful button here where I can assign the ticket to myself. So kind of cool there. And then basically, depending on the fields that are down here, and depending on what type of field they are, you can update the ticket from here. So we could say that the customer called in and we want to raise the priority, as we saw in our comment here. We can raise this priority to a high priority. And so this is just a simple drop down that we can interact with. And there's a few other fields here. We've got request type. We have organizations, which I alluded to earlier. This is obviously an opportunity to add organizations for notification purposes or otherwise. We have a knowledge base here that's available to us that we can interact with as an agent. And we've got a couple of other things that we don't necessarily need to go into for this class, but just know that most of these fields, if not all of them, depending on how your view edit screen is set up, should be editable for you as an agent. And a lot of times our form is actually filling in a lot of these fields for us, depending on what our customers have submitted. And in this case, I want to talk just briefly about approvals and just what approvals look like. So in this case, let's say and you can see we actually have this set up automated rather to go to Brian for approval. Brian is listed as my manager within Insight or Assets. And so actually an approval has automatically gone out to him. That is integration with Insight at its best. We have what are called object schemas, and within those object schemas, we may have an object schema called employees, and we won't get into this too much, but just letting you know how this functionality, or at least just at a very high level, where this functionality is coming from. We have an Insight integration with this employee to manager relationship that is pulling in my manager via automation, which is kind of neat. And so what has happened is this approval has actually gone to a Brian via email. He's received a notification where he can go in and approve. In this case, though, I want to show you what the approval looks like from the agent side, but then also from the customer side of things. So I'm going to go ahead and be my own boss today, and I'm going to add myself as an approver. So from the agent side, this is what an approval will look like. If I click approve, then it's going to transition from approved to waiting for support. If I go out to the portal, let's say I am a VP or C-suite individual that needs to approve some kind of request, or somebody just in general that doesn't necessarily need access to Jira, but still needs access to approve requests that come their way. I don't need a license. Again, I mentioned that earlier, to approve requests. And this is how it would present to me if I were to navigate to the customer portal via the email notification that I received, or if I just navigate directly to the portal, I would have this wonderful button that I could click on and approve it. And from there, you can see that I've immediately had my issue transition to waiting for support. So as a manager, I've approved my request. If I refresh this page, it's going to show that an approval is no longer needed and that my issue is now transitioned to waiting for support. So a couple of other little things before we move on here. There is this section at the top here where you can give feedback. There's a few buttons here that are kind of helpful, maybe just for you to be aware of. Maybe more importantly is the watch option. So as an agent, I have the opportunity to go here and watch an issue. I'm currently watching this issue already, but just to show you what it would look like if I weren't watching this issue, I could click on this eye icon and add myself as a watcher. Or if I have, now this does respect a permission, but I can actually, I do have access to add additional watchers here. So I can add Owen as a watcher. And watchers essentially will receive updates on this particular issue as it moves through its life cycle. So really, really helpful as an agent if you're wanting to keep an eye on other issues that other folks are working on and just want to keep in the loop. You have this thumbs up vote options button. I'll be honest, I haven't seen this used super effectively, at least in the JSM realm. I'm sure there's a wonderful use for it, but it is available to you to vote on the issue, which is kind of fun. So if you feel good about the thumbs up icon and makes you happy, by all means, go ahead and smash the thumbs up button. And then you have this share option here, which is really, really nice. I can share this issue with other people, or I can actually type in an email address and share via email. I can add a brief message. Hey, take a look at this now. And I can click share. I also have this copy link option as well, which is kind of cool. You can copy the link to the issue and give it or send it to somebody and they can navigate to it, assuming that they have access to look at this particular issue. So I've just shared this issue with Owen with a very rude message. Within the, so that's the share menu. If you have Slack integration, we won't go into that in this course, but Atlassian has has partnered with Slack in a very powerful way where you can actually connect Slack channels to your Jira Service Management project, which is really, really neat. And so this is an option to share this issue in Slack, which is kind of cool. And then over here, this ellipses is often overlooked, but should be because there's a lot going on here. There's an option to log time, again, just alluding to the Slack channel. You can convert this issue to a subtask. Should you have access to do these functions over here, you can move the issue, clone it, delete it. You have this find your field option, which is something I've used a fair amount, but this essentially will kind of show you whether or not a field or why a field is not available to you, or when it should be, or something along those lines. It's a really helpful little feature there just to be aware of. And then you can print or export your issue, or export to Word. So just really, really helpful just to be aware of this ellipses menu. There's a bunch of options here, but maybe most importantly for you as a service desk agent is the ability to log time on the issue, which is kind of neat. And that's something that we see often in a service desk environment, or at least an IT service desk environment, where teams are wanting to track how much work they've done on a particular issue. All right, so we've really broken down the issue view, interacting with the ticket itself. Let's talk about queues. Queues are probably one of the first stops you're going to make as an agent if you have issues coming into a service desk. And queues, as you can imagine, are how tickets are sorted for us as the agent. You can see queues up here in the top left-hand side of the screen. And essentially, we build out queues in a way that makes sense to the people who are actually doing the work. So for example, we have a queue for all open tickets here. And this obviously shows all the open tickets within our service desk project. So this is a really, really nice high level. We can also get a little bit more granular. We have just open tasks here. So we're just looking at open tasks. And so essentially, though, the idea here is we can create queues based on any filtering criteria that we want to have. And so they're essentially, if you're familiar with Jira, they're essentially issue filters. And so we can use Jira query language, if you're familiar, or JQL. And I'll actually show you how we'll filter a queue in just a moment. But I wanted to show you a quick feature before I forget. I've seen this especially in IT teams that all live within one IT project. I'm actually working with a client right now where there is the cybersecurity team, the applications team, the hardware team. Everybody is working within one service desk project. And so as you can imagine, queues get very busy very fast. So I want to draw attention to this star feature, very simple, but also very helpful and very powerful in the sense that if I have a bunch of different queues, I can star the queues that are most important to me, and it moves it to the very top, or moves these queues rather to the very top under this starred section here. So something just to be aware of when we're thinking about queues, and especially in the case that I just mentioned, where we have IT teams all working within one service desk project, which is a great opportunity for teams to do so, by the way, from an administrative overhead standpoint. But queues can get very busy. And so that's really, really nice to be able to star queues. Also, under this other category, I can expand or hide this section too. So that's also another way to kind of hone the view of queues for you as an agent. So let's actually, I mentioned that I would like to show you how queues are filtered. And how to create a queue here. So if I go into manage queues down here at the bottom, and on the top right-hand corner here, so just showing you that team priority correlates obviously to this category over here that's kind of grayed out here, or other. And I can actually sort these queues however I want to. And so team priority is obviously going to show at the top, other is going to show down under this category that I can hide, which is kind of nice. So if I go to create new queue, right here at the top, I have the option to add a new queue. So let's say, we'll just call this a new queue, that's fine. And what's nice here is under my filtering options, it's going to default to JQL. But if I'm not super familiar with JQL or Jira query language, I can actually use this switch to basic button over here that is just going to essentially present me with a series of drop downs based on the fields here. And then I can also add more fields here, like assignee, etc. So this is a really, really user-friendly filtering option here. But in this case, let's go back to JQL. And let's say I wanted to create a queue for all closed issues. So actually, I'll rename this to all, let's say, closed issues or something along those lines. I could filter, or I could create a filter where I just want to say resolution is, instead of unresolved, I could say resolution is done, for example. And what's really, really cool about that is I get instant feedback on my filter down here at the bottom, which just gives me an idea of what issues and the enormity or a large amount of issues that I'm going to ultimately pull in with this very limited query. Let's say I wanted a queue that would show me all issues that are in a status of waiting on customer. I would use the Jira query language, let's say resolution equals unresolved, in this case, similar to what we had by default, and status equals, if I could type here, waiting for customer. We'll put end quotes there. And also something you probably noticed here, if you're familiar with JQL, or even if you're not, just something to point out is you get this wonderful green check mark that makes you feel warm and fuzzy and it lets you know that your query is actually correct. So that's a nice instant feedback that we get within the screen, along with the instant results of our filter presented to us down here. And look at that. What's really, really nice is we have a more honed view of issues here that match this particular filter. So really, really cool feature here. And something else to note here, we have the column section. We can add different columns. In this case, we're looking at key, summary, report, or assignee status created. If I wanted to add additional columns, one that might make sense, priority. I can add the priority column here, and then you can see right here, I'm looking at the priority column. And what's really, really nice too, and not as obvious, is you can actually take these columns and rearrange them. So priority, in my mind, I'm actually going to want to see that more off to the left. I may even want to see that first. And so you can see that I simply can drag and rearrange these columns here within this columns bar to kind of present the queue how I want it to present it. So just in summation here, queues are incredibly important for agents working in Jira every day. And ultimately, we really want to make sure that queues are helpful by ensuring that the filters on these queues are accurate. An example of this would be if a request type gets renamed, that's going to directly affect our, or could potentially affect our queues if we're filtering in that manner. So just something to keep in mind, just from a Jira admin standpoint, just being aware of any kind of changes you make may have downstream effects. And so anyway, so now that we've covered the main points of JSM, including the customer portal, the agent side, along with the queues, I want to just briefly take a look at SLAs, or service level agreements. So if I go back to my project settings here, and I just want to go back to it, I'm going to discard, I'm not going to save this queue here. If I go back to project settings, actually I'm back at my main project screen. And I go to project settings and SLAs. This is where we're configuring what we saw on the issue view. And again, just hearkening back to it here on the top right-hand screen. Once it loads here. So SLAs are ultimately driving what I see in this box here. And we'll go ahead and throw this in an in progress status. And I can say, I'm working on this. And as you can see, we have screens set up on these transitions. And just real quick too, this is something that I sometimes forget to show you guys, is actually how to resolve an issue. So just similarly, I just put this in an in progress status as an agent. if I refresh my page, and also kind of hearkening back to SLAs, I'm going to go in and actually resolve this issue. So just to show you very briefly how an issue is resolved, I can transition it to that resolve status. Very often what we have on a transition is what we see here, which is a screen. And from here, I can select a resolution. That's a field that I've added to my screen. I have the option to add a linked issue, should there be one. I also have the option to respond to the customer or add an internal comment on this particular screen. We can say, this is resolved, and we can resolve the issue here. And I'm just going to refresh my screen one more time. So that's how, just very briefly, I want to show you how to resolve a particular issue. And jumping back to SLAs now, I just kind of want to use this as a vehicle to jump back into it. You can see actually that I've met my SLAs. I've met my SLA of time to first response, denoted by the green check mark here, and also the time. And I've also met my time to resolution SLA. So again, that's what SLAs are ultimately driving, is on this screen over here. So going back to SLAs here, we have time to resolution, or time to first response here. So looking at time of first response, if you open any of these SLAs, they're going to be presenting you with the same options here. And what you have is this opportunity to add a series of time goals that are based on a calendar and also a Jira query that is totally customizable. So in this case, we have a time to first response that's looking at a ticket category of incidents, and it's based on a sample 9 to 5 calendar. Same thing, ticket category of service requests here. And if I wanted to add a new time goal, I could click edit here. And then what I would do is click this plus button down here, and I can add what calendar I want to use here. So I'm presented with the calendars that are available to me. I can set that time goal. So I could say, I'm going to use a 24-hour calendar. And just to show you that you can essentially query anything here, I'm going to say, instead of issue category, I want to actually look at issue type equals incidents, or incident. And what's nice is this screen will kind of help you along with options that are available to you. And so this is just showing you how you can add a new time goal. In this case, this is a bit redundant since I'm already looking at incidents, but just showing you how that functionality works and how easy it is to add a new time goal here. And you can just stack them, which is kind of neat. So I'll hit cancel there. And then down here you have so we've got our time goal section. And then under here, we have the conditions section. So this is where I'm designating when I'm starting to count time. In this case, I'm looking at counting time when an issue is created. And I'm finishing counting time when a comment is added, waiting for customer resolution is set. So I think you guys probably get the idea with SLAs, highly customizable when it comes down to how we query against them. And then we have some time format options down here. And again, all of these are essentially set up in a very similar way. The menu looks almost exactly the same. So just want to talk about that very briefly. Speaking of tracking performance through SLAs, I just want to touch on reports very, very quickly. I know we're getting close to the end of our time here. I want to make sure I leave time for questions. But if I go back to our project here, and then under the knowledge category, we have this report section. And so speaking of SLAs, we have just some wonderful out-of-box reports that I just want to show you at a high level, but also encourage you to explore reports within JSM on your own time as well. But we have this wonderful SLA met versus breached report. So this is obviously showing me that my service desk isn't performing so great in this arena. I've got one SLA that's met and 87 that are breached. So from a managerial perspective, I might be wanting to have some discussions with my service desk. So really, really helpful report here. And what's really, really nice with a lot of these reports is, or actually all the reports rather, is you have the option to look at different ranges. So I was looking at the past 7 days. I can look at the past 48 hours. I can look at the past 30 days, which is kind of neat. So you can see I have a very micro or macro view here. And then also I have the option to select a custom range here, which is kind of neat. So a lot of customization when it comes to reports. And the purpose of reports as a whole is to prompt you to ask the question of why, for example. Why are we breaching SLAs here? Or what can we do differently to meet them? And so that kind of leads me to another report that I often like to show, which is the workload report. So this idea of, man, we're breaching the vast majority of tickets that are coming in here. What's my workload look like? So in this case, we see that Connor's kind of the top of the list and has the most issues. We could pretend, obviously, that these numbers aren't single digits, but let's say Connor's got 30 issues instead of 30, and David's only got 12. We could kind of infer from a managerial perspective that, man, maybe my workload is not as even keeled as it needs to be, and maybe it's an opportunity for reassessment. And so it's really, really nice to have these kinds of reports that allow you to kind of make those decisions very quickly, and also see just kind of on a holistic level how your service desk is doing. And so just really, really helpful. And then time to resolution, that's another report that we get often asked about. This is looking at how long is it taking us to resolve our issues. That's something, again, you're probably going to be very interested in as a service desk manager, but just quick highlight of reporting as a whole. Okay, as promised, we've got about 9 minutes here. I want to kind of open the floor for questions. Feel free to post those questions in the Q&A section, and I will be taking a look here. Can you share tickets with non-Jira users? Yeah, so yeah, going back to this idea of customers. So let me actually show you. Great question, Ellen. So going back to this idea of customers, if I go back into the customers menu, and as promised, we can organize our customers by an organization. And so you could either share those with other customers on an individual basis, or if all those customers were in an organization and you just share with a whole group of people, you could do so by adding that organization on that. If you were just a customer here, you can add them as a shared with person here. Yeah, so great question. Yep. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate your attention. Feel free to shoot me an email. Actually, let me go back to our presentation here and just show you. Here's my LinkedIn profile. Feel free, I encourage you guys to reach out. Here is just a brief summary of your upcoming classes that you might be interested in. And then also, again, here's my email address. Feel free to have, if you have any questions after this class concludes that come to mind, feel free to reach out to me directly. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks again.